You're listening to Bold Hearts, Big Moves, the show for female entrepreneurs who want it all: a thriving business, deep self love, and fulfilling relationships. I'm Erin Anderson, and each week we will dive into how to set stronger boundaries, make empowered choices, and show up in life and business with boldness, authenticity, and heart. Because let's be real, the money you make is directly related to the love that you have for yourself and the strength of your relationships. So if you're ready to lead with love and make those big moves with those bold hearts, let's dive in.
Okay, so we've talked about the listening boundary, we've talked about the talking boundary, we've talked about the physical boundary and the sexual boundary. Now, these are all boundaries that we think about on a daily basis, actually. They're boundaries that we can conceptualize a lot easier simply because there's something that's within our field of vision. We can hear them. We interact with people every single day, so listening and talking boundaries is something we really consider. And we also see our physical spaces. We protect our physical spaces. We really consider our sexuality as well, because that is also something that we often experience with our intimate partner, right? But today we're talking about a boundary that I think just eludes a lot of people. And the reason being is because it's not something we can see. So we don't often think about it, but it is a boundary that we feel. And that is our energetic boundary. Now, this is the boundary that I should say provides your self-containment. This is the boundary of your self-perception. Now, some people will say that there's an energetic boundary and a spiritual boundary, but honestly, I think they're one and the same. Because, well, and I think a lot of that too is because I'm religious and very Christian. I think that uh, our self-perception really comes down to our spirituality in a big way. And I'll explain that as we get further into this podcast today. But basically, I want you guys to think about the word containment. Okay? Everybody in this world has some type of containment field. Meaning that it is how we perceive ourselves. If you were to actually be able to see the energetic properties of people, you would actually kind of see a type of an eggshell. And what they've actually done studies on this where they've used like infrared type of technology, I think. I'm not 100% what type of technology they were using, but what they did is they actually were able to scan different people, and it like they were able to see kind of like almost like this energy pattern coming off of them, and it resembled very much like an eggshell around these people. And I also want you to consider vibrations, right? We're able to see sound waves and light waves and things like that through technology nowadays, and they're using the same type of technology to see the vibrational waves that come off of a person. It is a thing. It has actually been scientifically proven, if you look it up, that people do have an energy sphere or eggshell. Let's go with that. So that's what I mean by containment. It's what contains the person, okay? What this person operates within. Now, also thinking about containment, I'll put this before you, okay? So when you think about containment, you probably think about Tupperware, right? And what do we do with Tupperware? Well, we put our leftovers in the Tupperware, right? We think about saving or preserving something so we can consume it later. Well, if something has been inside your fridge for a while, right? And it's not been dealt with or it hasn't been used properly, when you open it, what is there? Mold, stink, ickiness, right? But then there's also those containers that have really good fresh food in them that you enjoy consuming. Our energies are very much like that. Now, I'm pretty sure if you're listening to this podcast, you guys have experienced someone that has the moldy type energy that kind of stinks, right? And maybe sometimes you didn't even know why, but you just could feel that aura, that coming off of them, right? Maybe it was the look they gave you. Maybe it was, um, I don't know, there's just something in their energy, right? That just made you feel uncomfortable. Whereas there's also the people around us that you feel like you've known for your entire life, even though you've just barely met them. I actually had this privilege today to meet somebody that I just instantly connected with, right? She's someone that would be more of that fresh container for me, right? And honestly, our energies, they move in and out of other people's containment fields as well. This is why it's really important for us to understand who we are, because our self-perception, like another way to say to talk about the energetic boundary is to say this is the boundary of self-perception. However we perceive ourselves really does come across in our energetic boundary. Now, you guys have heard me say people do not behave above their self-belief, right? And this is actually like part of that energetic boundary. Our self-perception really does make up our boundary here. Because if we believe that something's wrong with us, or we're weak, or that we can't trust ourselves, we're like, these are people that uh people who have really negative, toxic behaviors towards other people, like narcissists, sociopaths, psychopaths. Those are the types of people that they tend to prey on. Now, there's certain things that that person will do on a physical level, like hang their head, or they slouch, or they look not confident, right? Um, that they tend to prey upon. Um, like there was a study done a few years ago. They interviewed people who, or men, I should say, that were rapists. I almost said racists. Not what I was going for, but rapists. And they talked about like the women they seek out, like if she has a strong, confident demeanor, they are less likely to go after her. Whereas if she looks like the whole world is on her shoulders, that she doesn't look confident, she looks really sad, those are the ones that they go after, because they're more likely to blame themselves for the problem and then never report the action, never report the rape. And so they tend to get away with their behavior more. Now, I say that not to be like, oh, look out for rapists and things like that. It's more or less just to kind of paint the picture, right? That our energetic boundaries actually do come across in our physical form. And our self-perception, it also comes across physically as well. So how we believe, like our self-belief really does come at the very crux of this boundary, because someone who has a high self-confidence and a high self-belief is someone who tends to usually have a really high energetic boundary. They are people that are very magnetic, they're very authentic, and they're very loved by the people that know them. That said, this is something that I run into a lot, and this is also how the energetic and the spiritual boundary I feel are the same. I think that a lot of people, especially because society teaches this, they struggle with what they think humility is. They think that to have a healthy, like to be healthy and humble is to have a very not high opinion of yourself. And that's a whole lot like asking a diamond to break or seeing shards of a diamond, right? Because the thing is like to be truly humble is to have a high sense of self, to truly love yourself, but to not elevate yourself above another person. Pride is elevating yourself above someone or putting yourself below. It doesn't give you or anyone else an equal opportunity at being a fantastic human. True humility is actually understanding yourself as a fantastic human, behaving that way, and bringing other people up with you. That is true humility. And I can tell you that when I understood myself, that truly was one of the most humbling moments of my existence. And I'm so grateful that I was able to see myself in such a pure and beautiful light through the lens of the most pure and beautiful love. And that was through, my Heavenly Father. And so this is something that I talk a lot about, is putting on the God goggles. Now, this is also something I talk about in the Other Side of the Struggle podcast. So you can definitely go look at that. It's in the God Goggles episode. And I'm not sure what number that is, guys. There's 125 episodes in that podcast, but the God Goggles is there. If you scroll through it, you should find it. But I want to touch on that a little bit today and talk about the God Goggles here because is so prominent to this discussion. Someone who has a high energetic boundary is someone, like I said, who does see themselves the way God created them to be. A good example of this actually is Jesus Christ himself. Now, this was a man who was not only magnetic, but also repellent. He repelled those that did not want anything to do with truth. He repelled those that did not want anything to do with wisdom. He repelled those that wanted to be their own God. However, those that wanted a deeper and higher sense of wisdom, a deeper and higher sense of self, and wanted more love, wanted more peace, wanted more guidance in their lives by someone who was way wiser than them, he was deeply magnetic to. This is a lot of the reason, too, why he was magnetic to children. Children loved being guided by him. And this is also one of the reasons why in the Bible he talks about becoming childlike, right? Not childish, childlike, submitting to the will of the Father. And another way I like to say that is submitting to his vision of his creation. I actually was talking about this very thing with a client recently about this idea of envisioning who he sees you as. I personally believe that God doesn't make mistakes. I believe he makes miracles. And if he makes miracles and humanity, especially femininity, are his crowning achievements and his crowning creations, well, then doesn't that make us also his crowning miracles? If we're not seeing ourselves that way, then we have a disconnect with self that is actually a separation or a tear in your energetic boundary. Um, However, when we see the truth of who we see ourselves from a space of love. What it does is it actually heals these tears that we have, not only in our energetic boundary, but also in our soul. And I think this is part of the reason why I think they really are one in the same again. It's because whatever we're feeling in our soul also does show up in our energetic boundary. Another way to explain this is oftentimes our body can show signs of what our thoughts are. Okay. So for example, if someone feels unsupported, they might find that they have a lot of pain in their back and in their feet or ankles, because these are the areas of support. They might find that they have a lot of pain in their structural system, because structure and support go hand in hand. If somebody feels like they have a broken heart, oftentimes they have oftentimes they have like heart issues. If life is just hard to digest, oftentimes our body shows up with digestive issues. If we feel like we need more protection, oftentimes this is where we start to gain a lot of weight. So our bodies even show up, our physical senses actually show up for us in the way that we think about or perceive our world. This is also why the energetic boundary is probably the first one to take a massive hit when we have perceived trauma. And then it stays ripped when we don't actually get in and heal that trauma. So the other thing I wanted to mention is, since this is also the boundary of self-perception, and another reason why this is such a spiritual boundary as well is because one of the first things that a spiritual adversary does is gets us to doubt our sense of self. He gets us to believe that we are less than worthy. And one of the things that I do a lot with my clients is, and this is what I listen for in their subconscious, is their languaging, right? Oftentimes their language can point to what types of traumas they've had in the past. For example, I had a conversation with a gal not too long ago, and as she was talking, I had to stop and I said, "Did you?" And she's doing well financially now, but I had to ask her, did you have a lot of financial struggles as a child? And growing up in the family that you did, and were a lot of that struggle, like, was a lot of that struggle placed upon your shoulders, being responsible for someone else? And she like broke down in tears and she's like, yes, how did you know? She hadn't told me the story, but yet her subconscious was spitting out a lot of these bits and pieces of her fragmented childhood. She had taken a lot of this on as a truth that money was unsafe. Even though she was going on to create more money, she had taken it on to believe that money was unsafe, people were unsafe. And she really had a hard time opening up to other people without getting to know them first. And that was okay. And like that's one of the things that we can respect, right? She's in a sense of self-protection. But one of the other things that she had been recently doing was gaining weight, and she didn't know why, even though She was eating a very healthy diet. She was exercising. She was doing everything right. All of a sudden, her body, like her hormones just started becoming off. She didn't know why. And she started to gain weight. And it was because of that sense of protection that was needed, right? So, we talked about again that sense of perception and healing the crack that was inside of her with that inner child, right? And so we started actually like looking at some of her thoughts and like what she had perceived these traumas to mean. Now, if you remember the five-step thought process, you've got your facts, like what actually happened, then your thoughts about the facts. And this is actually where trauma takes place, is in between those two, right? Our thoughts about the facts or our perception is what actually creates trauma inside of us. It's because trauma is basically the stage where we cannot move past a certain instance. And the reason being is because we've taken it to we've taken whatever happened to understand that that thing is not a safe space for us. Okay. So we started talking about what to do, and we're going to get into this in just a second. So if you're feeling like you have this tear or this crack in your self-perception and obviously therefore your energetic boundary, then I'm going to tell you kind of how to heal that in just a second. Um, Another thing too that can happen with an energetic boundary, and especially if you're not aware of your energetic boundaries, is you can pick up on the energies and feelings of another person. So, like, how many of you guys have been out there in the world doing business or just rubbing shoulders with other moms, and all of the sudden, like, you just feel a certain way and you don't know why? This is what we call being an empath, right? And that's being able to pick up on the energies and perceptions or the experiences of another person. You are a lot more likely, by the way, to be an empath if you have had childhood trauma. Go figure. And the reason why is because you have a higher sense of perception with the people around you. So that way you know what to avoid and what to attract. Now, sometimes, again, our sense of self-protection also comes into this, and that can cause some messes for sure. But people in general who have had childhood trauma do tend to have a higher sense of being able to pick up on the emotions of other people, so they know, like it's kind of almost a heightened awareness. So that way they know how to quickly respond in the situation. So they're not having things blow up in their faces. Okay. Now, the other thing too about having adversaries or quote unquote familiar spirits is the whole point of an adversary is to help you lose your sense of self. They want you to mistrust yourself because when you mistrust yourself, you do not take necessary action. This is something that also shows up in your energetic boundary. Now, adversaries, or in the Bible, they're called familiar spirits, and the reason why is because they are very good at sounding like you. You've heard the whole thing that a man convinced against his will is of the same opinion still. Basically, what that's saying is a man will not pick up, or a woman, I should say, will not pick up on truth unless if it is in their own voice. Because we are the ones that have to perceive truth in our lives, we must also take truth on in our voice. So these adversaries actually watch you. They watch how you act. They study you, And then they come forward, um, and they penetrate your mind in a sense and help, like not help, but they make you think that these are your thoughts, and they become very negative, and they teach you that you're not good enough. And so, no matter what type of effort you put in, it's never going to be enough. This is why people tend to burn out very quickly, especially in doing the things that they're here to do, things that they actually love doing, and then they don't know why they're in burnout. I love doing this thing, but I just feel so burnt out and I can't figure out why, right? Ever been there before? I know I for sure have. Well, it comes down to again, what our self-perception is and what these adversaries have put in. So, for an example, some of the thoughts before I went on my healing journey, and if you want to know more about that, that's also in the Other Side of the Struggle podcast, Healing from Betrayal Trauma. So go check that out. My story in there. But I used to believe that I was unlovable, that I was unworthy, that I was basically just a piece of driftwood that had no good to it at all except for being burnt alive. Kind of harsh thoughts, right? But as I began to work on this piece, this energetic boundary, and honestly, I didn't realize that's what I was doing at the time. I was working on my sense of perception, my self-perception, I should say. And as I began working on that, I began to realize this one truth. And that is, if we come from an all-loving, all-knowing God that is willing to sacrifice his son for us, and that the son is willing to sacrifice his life for us, then why do I not perceive myself as worthy of that sacrifice? If they think I'm worthy of it, why am I questioning that? To me, that was a whole lot like telling Jesus that what he did was a big waste of time, a big waste of his energy, and a waste of his mission and purpose. Didn't make sense to me, right? Therefore, what I was hearing could not possibly be my own voice. If I came from love, and if I came from peace, and if I came from truth, because that's what God is, and if I am his daughter, and those things are alive and well within me, then I would never think these things about myself. Therefore, it couldn't be my own voice. So I'll tell you what I did here in just a second, because I do want to talk about like what to do if you feel like your energetic boundary is low. But I will also say this, that while I was in that self-perception, I was also in a deep state of depression. And I wasn't able to be consistent in the things that I knew that I needed to do. I wasn't able to show up the way that I wanted to show up. And it was because that self-perception was so fractured inside of me. I knew what I loved to feel like, but I didn't feel like I deserved to be that person. Like I hadn't earned it. And when I realized that I didn't have to earn it, I was already there because that's who God created. I was able to really step into that. And that really made a difference in the way I showed up in life. So, what do we do then if we have a fractured energetic boundary? Well, again, put on those God goggles, right? See yourself the way God sees you. That is very, very important. But also, one of the things that you want to do is get really good at asking yourself some questions like, is what I'm feeling really mine, or am I feeling the feelings of someone else? You can tell if immediately you know why you're feeling the way you do. Like if something comes up to you and you say, oh, yeah, that just happened, or I was thinking about that, or, you know, as you think about it, it makes you feel more that way. Most likely, this is your thing that needs to be dealt with. However, if you can't find a reason within 5 seconds, 5 to 10 seconds, why you might be feeling the way you do, because your subconscious is very good at spitting out information. If you're sitting in an emotion and you're wondering why, and it is yours, your subconscious will tell you almost instantly. But if it's not yours, you won't be able to find a reason why you feel the way you do within 5 to 10 seconds. And so this is where you get to give it back to whoever it belongs to. Now, you might not know who it belongs to, but this is where you get to just simply say either out loud if you're that daring. I might not be if I'm in a if I'm in a park with a bunch of moms, I'm not going to be like, this depression, I give it back to whoever it belongs to, right? Like that's going to call somebody out in very uncomfortable ways. Yeah, don't do that, okay? But I might say in my mind, okay, this is a depression, or this is anxiety, or this lack of confidence. This isn't mine. I'm going to give it back to whoever it belongs to so that way they can address it. Because we cannot learn another person's lesson. So, this is also another reason why an energetic boundary is super good. We take the lessons that are meant to be ours in life and we learn our lessons and realize that we cannot learn lessons for another person. This is also a piece of that energetic boundary, okay? And giving back the emotion to whoever it belongs to. Another piece to setting a really good energetic boundary is getting a good quality tea tree essential oil. Now, those of you that know me personally know that I am a big doTERRorist. I love doTERRA essential oils. I think they're fabulous. And honestly, like the tea tree oil is one that I just love to huff. Like I love cracking open a bottle and being, sniff it in. I love it. Um, I just love the smell of it and it brings me so much peace. But it also helps me recenter my energetic boundary. And it really is the oil of energetic boundaries. I'm going to tell you a little bit about it. Now, I have a book for Essential Emotions, is what it's called. You can actually get this book on an app on your phone. And again, it's called Essential Emotions, and it has like a little teardrop, it's a green app, and it has like a teardrop inside of it. But basically, uh, it's very good to help you understand your self-perception, but also it's very good to help you break any energetic ties that you might have to someone that might be emotionally sucking you dry. So it kind of protects you from like energetic vampirism. Um, and so if you have someone that likes to stir stuff up in your life, I love putting a little bit of tea tree on my heart or in my like behind my ears, sometimes just across my forehead because it gives me clarity of mind. And again, it just helps me recenter back into myself, um, giving me that containment that I have within me, that fresh new look. Remember, what kind of Tupperware are we opening here? But it gives me that fresh new look, that fresh perspective, and it's something that I really love. And so if we're dealing with a fracture in self or a fracture in that energetic boundary, I really love using tea tree oil for that. Um, but the one thing that works faster than anything I have seen when it comes to an energetic boundary is instead of making the fracture between you and yourself, right? We want to become our own best friend. Therefore, we don't want to fracture ourselves. We need to fracture ourselves from the adversarial influence, the lies that are happening in our head. This is why having a good truth and lies exercise is so necessary and so important in our day-to-day lives. So one of the things I started doing is I would listen for what was being said, realizing like the thoughts that were happening in my head, realizing that again, if I come from love, truth, and light, and those thoughts aren't matching love, truth, and light, they must be a lie. The opposite of a lie is truth. So I started speaking the opposite. And so, to give you an idea, let me kind of tell you how this went down with my physical body. Um, and again, if you guys know me, you also know that I have some extra poundages that I would love to lose, not because society says that this is how a perfect woman should look. I'm sorry, it doesn't exist unless if you are a living, walking, airbrushed painting, right? There's always some type of flaw to somebody's body. But there is also something to be said about being healthy, right? And that is more or less what I want. But when we have extra weight, the psychological programming that society puts inside of us, and even that of our parents and our grandparents, is that if you have extra weight, something's wrong with you. You're not good enough. You're not perfect enough. You're ugly. You're disgusting, yada, 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 right? And so we might look at ourselves in the mirror and see all of the fat rolls and all the flabs and all of the moles and all of the skin tags and all of the wrinkles and blah, 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 all of the imperfections. This is one thing that women, especially, but even men, struggle with big time. And it's something that I used to struggle with as well. And so as I thought about fat, ugly, uh, flabby, these are all really inflammatory, negative words that are not true. They cannot be true. They are derogatory to the self. And it's no wonder why believing something like that would fracture an energetic boundary. So as I got looking at what is true, and trying to see things from the perspective of a higher being that is Christ and Heavenly Father to me, I realized something. And this is what I said out loud. If I rejoiced in heaven for a body, that must mean I was dang excited for a body. What I know about fat cells is they encapsulate uh, toxins. They encapsulate things that the body perceives as a threat. So really, it's trying to protect me. It's trying to protect this vessel. So therefore, the reason I shouted for joy in heaven to have a physical body was because I understood then, as I do now, that my physical body is the physical manifestation on this earth of God's perfect love for me. Even though my body might not be perfect, it shows up loyally. It is the most loyal thing I can think of. It's not out to hurt me. It's giving me messages of what it needs to make sure it functions properly. And if I'm willing to simply listen, there's that listening boundary, guys. It will tell me exactly what I need to do to be in the best shape I've ever been. I choose to believe in love. You have no place with me. Get behind me. And all of a sudden, when I said that out loud, I almost felt like this immediate healing happening. Realizing that my body was not disgusting, that it was super desirable. That maybe I needed to work on making it as healthy as possible. And that's one of my goals this coming year. One of my New Year's resolutions is to become healthy in physical body. But my body is my best friend. It is the physical representation of God's love for me. And all of a sudden I felt this, and I still do. Like, even as I'm saying this, I feel this disconnect from anything that wants to harm me, an adversary. And I feel more bright. I feel more energetic. And I feel more myself. I've come home. And anything that doesn't belong here is immediately expulsed, right? Getting out of my energy, getting out of my space. It does not belong here. So speaking the actual truth out loud in detail is necessary. And it's also one of the things that we do. I talk about like the 4 main energies, or basically the 4 things that create your energies. And that is your mind, what you see in your head, the way you speak about it, your voice, your hands, and because we create things with our hands, and our love. When we have all 4 of those things together, we create miracles as well. So if you've been dealing with a fracture in your energy, and maybe you've been dealing with burnout, or maybe you've been dealing with overwhelm, maybe you've been dealing with some really, really harsh self-perceptions, maybe you've been dealing with some body dysmorphia, whatever it is, finding the truth about yourself really, really helps create a fantastic energetic boundary. And it's something that no matter what kind of container you put yourself in, it keeps you fresh, gives you a fresh perspective, and it keeps you on your game. And it helps you be as authentic as possible. So, my loves, that is your energetic boundary, what you can do to protect it. And again, if you guys have questions, please feel free to text the show. I do get those messages. And if you have any questions at all about anything I can do for you, or anything you'd like to see me put on the show, let me know and I'll make it into an episode. All right, my loves. Until next time, I'll see you soon. Bye.
All right, Boundary Boss babes. I'm super excited that you tuned in with me today. Make sure you tune in again next week as we chat about more Boundary Boss babe topics. We're going to get into so many other things about how to set boundaries with your business, how to set boundaries with your relationships, so you can truly have the time, the money, and the flexibility that you are seeking. So tune in next week. Make sure you subscribe to this podcast. Let your other boss babe friends know about it. And also, if you've got any questions, make sure you submit them into the podcast by clicking on the send us a text message at the bottom of the podcast description. I look forward to seeing you guys next week. See you later, boss babes.